Welcome back, Flyers nitty-gritty fans, to Getting Gritty with It with your host, Wolok. My partner in crime, as always, Vasili Gianarakos, back for another episode. My friend, how are you?
Doing well, Yariv. We're in the very slow period of
The
hockey
malaise.
news. Yeah, especially Flyers-wise, there hasn't really been much news aside from a couple tidbits. So we'll kind of go through all that here, and we'll do another fun exercise and a little bit of a fun idea, and we'll kind of break that down later. But I'm doing well, and I'm excited for this episode. How you doing, my friend?
Doing well, dude. Doing well. It's definitely the slow season. We're going to have, we're trying not to repeat ourselves every episode. It's going to happen a little bit over the offseason just because there's not that much progress happening. But I'm still really excited for the season. I'm waiting for the next liftoff video for the Flyers. I'm like, let's go. I was like, feed them to me. I was like, I'll watch all that shit. I'm already so pumped. I was actually just texting Chris Mayer about it today. And we were texting back and forth. We're both like, we're so goddamn excited for the season. And we were like laughing because we're like, there's no reason that, most people shouldn't be that excited for a team that's not, projectedly making the playoffs. But I'm like pumped. I don't know if you feel that way too, but I'm so excited for the next season.
I'm excited as well. I think it's just the fact that there's a new regime in place, and I mean, it's kind of their time now to take the spotlight away.
Yeah.
Like Briere came in right after the trade deadline, even though he was the GM, he didn't really come in at a time where he could do anything. So now the stamp's been placed, at least his stamp from his first off season. I do want to see what the team looks like under him, and if there's kind of a different feel, right? Because as we said in the past, a lot of the time, leadership takes an effect from the top down. So I do want to see how, the rest of the locker room and the staff and things like that react to just being under a fresh, completely new regime, with Briere making some moves kind of, heading into the season.
Do you know what this reminds you of? Before we officially, I was just thinking about it as we were talking. It reminds me of when Chuck Fletcher got fired from Minnesota and Bill Guerin came in. And
it's a similar scenario. I mean, former player.
They rebuilt. They bought out their two biggest contracts, and people thought they were going to be at the bottom of the league, and it didn't, not at the bottom of the league, but they thought they were going to take a step back.
Yeah,
and that didn't happen. Actually, they were much better than people.
When you have Kaprizov, I mean,
of course. Also, not that different. They have
Michkov.
We got Michkov. It's like, all right.
Hopefully
we have more success, and we don't have that monstrous buyout like they did. Those contracts were humongous that they bought out.
Yeah,
they had like 13 million in dead cap space or something.
From maybe that's Suter and Parise. Yeah,
something it's like that high. Yeah, something stupid high. All right. Before we get it kicked off, just again, I want to remind everybody, please like, subscribe, hit the bell for additional notifications on the podcast. Again, we appreciate everything that you guys have done. We are so close to 700 as we record this. Hopefully we go over the edge on that one. But again, just want to humbly say thank you again for everybody who's listening, everybody new, everybody who just signed up, subscribed or whatever. You guys are awesome. And again, we'll keep this through the summer, and then we're going to ramp up for the season. And like you heard in the beginning, we're just as excited as you guys if you're listening in the off season. Also, do want to give a shout out to our sponsor, Jim Steaks on 4th and South. They are not open yet, but they will be open soon. Again, just remember them in your hearts. They will be open soon from their fire. Jim Steaks on 4th and South. Go get yourself a cheesesteak. All right. Let's get into it. We have a lot of topics to talk over today. Surprisingly, kind of made a nice little format. So we'll talk about Frost. We'll talk about some of Fedotov news, some Alex Bump news, which is pretty cool. A little bit of Cutter Gauthier comments, both good and bad in this case, or somewhat bad. And then we're going to go through a segment where we're just talking about question marks going into the season, and if they can be addressed, or what the odds of them being addressed, and then what's the backup plan behind that. So we'll get into that there at the end. All right, let's get into it. So as we sit today, we've talked about this quite a bit already. Morgan Frost is still not signed. From what we're hearing, shout out to Chris Mayer, who posted something on Twitter. Also heard this from Bill Meltzer, Jason Martinez. The sides seem to be far apart. Vasili, you and I were just talking about literally 2 minutes ago. The way I see it with Frost, he has no leverage. The team is not rushing to get him in the lineup. They're not competing next year. He is an RFA for a bit here for at least 3 more years. So he doesn't really have much leverage. His only leverage really is to wait. I imagine the contract probably will not be long term, 1 or 2 years at most. And he'll get a little bit of a bump, but I don't think he's going to get like anything crazy here. And even if it goes into the season, I mean, it really does not serve him well. This is not Alex Nylander. He doesn't have a big resume. He's not going to arbitration. Like, he doesn't have many options. So this is his lever. They'll use it. They'll hold up. They'll negotiate as much as possible. Probably get the deal done right before camp is my my guess. What do you think, Vasili?
Yeah, I think it's going to be something similar. Obviously, from what we're hearing, the sides are not very close. I would imagine the fact that, I mean, Frost, he had about, I think, 6 points in his first 27 games. And then he had over the final 55, I think he had 40 points.
Yep.
So I'd imagine that Frost camp is using that, final stat of 40 points in the final 54 games to say, hey, I deserve a bit of a longer term potentially, or more money. And then obviously the Flyers are probably saying, sure, you did well to end the season, but you started off very cold with only 6 points in 27 games there. So I think that's probably where it lies. Like, maybe Frost wants a little bit more term, or potentially a little more of a bump than the Flyers are willing to give. And the Flyers obviously have most of the leverage here, just because Frost has really only done it and produced, at a second line rate essentially for half a season. So due to that, I think the Flyers are just going to wait it out, right? And then once they kind of get a little closer to the season, maybe the player gets a little more antsy and kind of gives in to their terms there. But I don't expect anything to not get done, right? Like, I think probably end of August, right before training camp, even potentially like as training camp's happening. Like, we remember a couple of years ago, Travis Konecny and Provorov didn't have contracts into the first week of training camp and then got signed. And nobody really made a big fuss about it, right? Afterwards, once they were signed. So usually, until a player signed, this is like a newsworthy thing. But then once it finally happens, it's kind of in the past. So I think that's what's going to likely occur here. So it'll be interesting to see what the deal ends up being, really.
Yeah, and again, he doesn't have much leverage. So even in the case with, I thought that was a great point, bringing up Konecny and Provorov. They had leverage too.
Yeah.
Like, they actually had leverage. They were better players at their age. Not that Frost has been bad, and he's had more unluckiness. Let's make it very clear. Bill Meltzer brought this up on Jason Martinez' podcast, and it's so easy to forget. Like, one, I thought the great point that he brought up, which I think comments on what Charlie was saying. I honestly don't think they're being very honest on how successful Morgan Frost has been. I really don't. I think people are kind of fooling themselves a little bit. Like, again, I understand the contract negotiation point, but the guy was 6th in power play time. He wasn't necessarily like being used properly on the power play. He produced more than everybody on the team in the last 51 games?
54 games.
54 games. That, again, and don't forget, his first season was the what's called COVID season.
Yeah.
Great first year to come in the league. And then he gets a severe injury, missing an entire season.
Like 2 games in. So
I really don't think, I think people like to look at what's in front of them, and they haven't been there for Tippett's up and downs. So nobody remembers those. So Tippett's sky's the limit. He takes over games. I get it. I love Tippett, and I agree he's further along to some degree than Frost. But like, people are just, I don't know. It's like when I hear people talk about Provorov and they go, oh, he had 1 good season, 2 good seasons. Like, even his worst seasons here, he was the best defenseman we had.
I think it's just a wait and see situation. Like, we'll see what happens, right? Like, he's going to sign, and then we'll see how he performs. I do think that it's a little bit overblown that, like, oh, he only did it against bad teams. He only scored at 5-on-5. What about the power play?
That's not true. It's not true at all.
No, I mean, like, but if you're going to use that logic for Frost, you have to apply it to other really good players in the league. Like, nobody discounts the fact when a star player scores against a bad team, but because it's Frost, they're going to discount it, right? So, we got to kind of take things with a grain of salt. I think he has talent. He showed he can produce in the past. The most interesting part will be, okay, once he gets his contract, how does he settle in next season? Because I think the Flyers are kind of looking at his consistency, and that's what they want to see from him if they're going to continue to keep signing him moving ahead, right?
Yeah, and you know what bothers me is we literally do not have another option better than him right now, and people still don't give him the respect. Like I get it. Like I was harsh on him in the beginning of the year too, and he quite frankly he deserved it. But once it turned around, I wasn't going like, oh, maybe he can. You know, like you really just look for guys to progress. Like what do people expect? Like all of these guys, Tippett included, could have a cold streak next year. You know, like people already gave up on Farabee too. Like I see it. You see the excitement dip from, oh, promising young player to, oh, okay, well, he's a player, you know, like it turns out, oh, he's all right. And it's like everybody just expects these guys come in the league, tear it up, get monster contracts, and that's what your team is full of. And then when you look at the most successful in the team, they are littered with guys who are second chance guys. Like most of their team are those guys, especially if you look at Vegas, who just won the cup. Like even Jack Eichel was the second chance guy who, don't get me wrong, I heard even in the playoffs, people were saying he wasn't even a top line center. I heard people say
well, that's ridiculous. I mean, the real thing to look out for Vegas, Yariv is Marchessault, right? Like Florida literally said you could have him for nothing, and then look what he turned out to be. So
Carlson.
Not to say that these comparisons are similar to Frost whatsoever, because that's not what we're trying to say.
I think it is actually. Go ahead. I'm sorry,
but really, I don't know.
I'll explain why.
This is my thing. Like I don't think that his story is over in terms of he's not finished developing. He's still a young player. Agreed. So I don't want to jump to conclusions and say he's going to be Jonathan Marchessault, right?
Oh, well, that's not what I meant, but go ahead.
So that's what I mean, right? Like, I think he's a talented player. I don't know if he's ever going to be to that level. I just think you need to give him some more time. Like, he really, last season was his first real full year in the league, and he didn't really start getting top 6 usage until halfway through the season. So let's see what happens when he gets more consistent usage and if he can continue it, basically.
Absolutely. So this is what I was thinking when you were talking, because I actually think in some sense it actually is a really good comparison. And if you go back, to that expansion draft, who was the player that was up for being taken from the Flyer? Potentially. It was between two guys at the end. Do you remember?
Wasn't it Lawton Bellemare?
Exactly. How old was Scott Lawton at the time?
That I'm not sure. Maybe like
I believe
maybe 25.
I believe he was 24 years old. The same age as Morgan Frost. I remember that time very well. Most fans, at least 80% that I saw, podcast included, did not think Scott Lawton was going to be protected and did not think it was worth investing in him. I remember that very clearly. We ended up losing Bellemare, who was also a good player, who people also didn't believe in at the time because he didn't score. Meanwhile, he's pretty much played on every cup team since then. So look at Scott Lawton's career. I think if you look at Frost, it's not that he's the same as them, but he is in that bubble of guys where if there was an expansion draft, people would count him out, even with what he did.
Okay,
and then he would go to a team like Vegas and explode. Instead of just giving it the patience here. And maybe exploding for him is 60 points. Yeah. And that's what he is. You know? Even though I think he has more than that. And 60 points is pretty damn good.
For sure his ceiling is like 60, 70 points
that's
around
a really good player.
Area. That's what I mean, right? So
like a really good player in the NHL.
Let's see if he could consistently produce at that level. I mean, to end the year last year, he was there, right? So we'll see if he can keep it up, basically.
Yeah, like what's a 70-point player in the league? That's at the very least Cam Atkinson.
That's a good second line player. That's a good second line player.
Yeah. Cam Atkinson was a 70-point player. Even when he put up 40 goals, he didn't put up 50 assists on top of it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like these are your top 6 forward. Like I think Frost still projects to be a top 6 forward. Like, I don't know. Do you agree with that?
I think it's definitely possible. I just need to see more consistency.
Sure.
And that's pretty much it. And I think that's what the Flyers probably want to see too. Mm-hmm. Like you did it for 54 games. Let's see now you do it for 70 games, right?
Like the same thing about Tippett, right?
Yeah. The same. Well, even him, right? Like, and that's goal scorers are streaky. And Tippett, though we had a really good year last year, there were bunches of games where he didn't score a lot of goals, and there were bunches of games where he scored a lot more goals. So I think with young guys in general, like these guys, you have to remember, right? Tippett, Frost, only 24 years old. And for both of these guys, it was really, like I have been saying, it was their first kind of crack at a full 82 game NHL season and being used in a prominent scoring role. So that takes some adjustment time to learn how to score at this level consistently, playing against the other team's best players. So I think we just need to wait and see see if they can progress off of that going forward, basically.
Yeah, I think they still have a nice projection. So let's keep moving. Let's get into the next story we have. And this is, I don't know how big of a story this is, and I don't know how much we can really provide insight on it, but there is word that the IIHF, the International Hockey Federation, Ice Hockey Federation, sorry, they are investigating the irregular nature of the contract dispute between the Flyers and Siska over Ivan Fedotov. Now, that means they're going to look into the fact that the Flyers had this player signed. They even told his contract, and essentially KHL wiped it out. They went, nope, doesn't matter anymore because he didn't play last year with you guys, so that's your contract, even though they're the ones who stopped it. On its surface level, IIHF has a point. Clearly, the KHL fucked up. But I'll be honest with you, I don't see a scenario where the KHL cares that much. But I would hope that the Flyers can use this to buy some goodwill. Be like, hey, let's not do this shit moving forward to one another. We won't do it to you. You won't do it to us. And that means you guys have to, go easy on. I'm talking about the KHL, not his team. You have to go easy on Mitchkov, that if he wants to buy out, you got to let him leave. You can't come up with some bullshit reason to stop him from leaving. That would be my conversation. I don't know if that's a pipe dream, could be, but that would be where my head was at. I would be trying to, fix my top investment. If it happens that Ivan Fedotov comes over from this, great, but I just don't see it happening, and I don't see the Flyers operating as if he's coming here.
Yeah, it's an interesting situation, obviously, because the Flyers did have him under contract for last season. He then has to do his military service, so he doesn't get to come over. The Flyers told the contract, which effectively means that they should have his rights and have a 1-year deal with him at some point, like either this season or moving forward. Obviously, Siska and the KHL aren't honoring that. The IIHF, like you said, Yariv kind of gets involved here and wants to make a decision because they realize that, okay, there technically was a contract in place that the Flyers had. So what really should be honored here? Should it be the told contract, or should it be Siska's contract that they signed with Fedotov, which I believe is 2 seasons long? So it'll be interesting. I mean, I think no matter what the IIHF rules, I don't think Siska effectively really cares. I mean, Fedotov
do anything.
Yeah, well, they don't have an agreement in place right now. Like they used to have a transfer agreement in place between the KHL and the NHL. That effectively, with all the things happening politically, is not currently active. So they don't have to do anything. Pretty
They've
much
also punished all of Russia's programs, which is
exactly. So pretty much what's happening. Pretty much what's happening here is that we'll see. If sorry, I just lost my train of thought. Yeah, so we'll see pretty much what happens, I guess, like in this situation. I don't expect the KHL to really care. I mean, Fedotov is at their training camp, started today, so he's at their camp. I feel like if this was a serious thing, he probably wouldn't be there. So no matter what they rule, I expect him to be with Siska moving forward. But we'll obviously see. The Flyers, I mean, it would be good for them. You get another asset here, but I don't think there's much really to make out of this other than the fact that there's a ruling, and the ruling probably won't be respected either way at this point. So
I mean, they didn't respect the contract, so why would they care about the ruling? The only thing I can see is that it'd be leverage against them in the future. But again, with the actions that the Hockey Federation took towards Russian players around the world, can you blame them for fighting back to some degree? I don't know. I mean, I would be pissed if I was them. If I was from a hockey standpoint, I'm not talking about the military conflicts or any of that. If my job as a hockey person, I'm trying to do my job, right? And everybody's not letting my players go to tournaments and all that, there might be some animosity building there. I don't know. But hopefully it doesn't continue. I hope it just ends up with an amicable solution. That's it. Just something amicable that both sides are not pissed off. I don't want any of that shit going forward. It's just a headache. All right, let's get into our next piece of news. It's a nice little story about Alex Bump, who recently announced that he is leaving the University of Vermont. And I'll go to your insight on this, Vasili, that this is due to there's a chance. Well, actually, I'll let you announce it. So you said it anyway, but Alex Bump might be moving. We're not 100% sure where he's going. And it's going to be interesting where to see, because he's probably going to go somewhere a lot more prestigious, under more eyes, because from what we even saw in dev camp, I mean, he's a much more talented player than he's getting attention for. We don't know what his ceiling is as an NHL player, but the guy's got a scoring upside. So I would say it's going to be kind of exciting from a prospect standpoint. Might get to see him on TV a little bit.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. I mean, the real reason why he left, and I think the reason he was drawn to Vermont initially was that Todd Woodcroft was going to be the coach there. Right. And then he was fired. I think there was some sort of incident that might have occurred that led to the firing. I'm not 100% sure on that, but yeah, so he was fired. I guess that makes Bump kind of change his mind here and say, well, Woodcroft was the real reason I wanted to go to Vermont, so now I'm going to enter the transfer portal and head somewhere else. There's no guarantee that he's going to be heading to University of Minnesota. I think it's just been rumored that might be a possibility here, because Logan Cooley just signed his entry-level contract with the Arizona Coyotes. So effectively, that means that there's a scholarship now open, as Cooley is no longer going to be playing with Minnesota. He's going to be with the Coyotes in the NHL. So with that, I mean, there's a possibility for Bump potentially to go to Minnesota. I believe he's a Minnesota native, so it'd be like a homecoming of sorts for him there. And it could be exciting for the Flyers, because he might have the chance to play on a very talented line with Jimmy Snuggerud and Oliver Moore potentially if he goes to Minnesota. So those are two really highly regarded prospects. So for a guy like Bump to play with those two, I think that would be great for his development, obviously. So we'll see what happens and where he ends up eventually here.
Yeah, the Flyers have really been slaying these later picks, and Bump is definitely one of them. So I'm excited to see where he ends up. I'm fortunate for his team. I'm sure they don't want to lose him. He's got to be one of their best players. So, good luck to him. We'll find out. We'll update when he signs on here. And again, I like Bump. And I would imagine he probably only has 1 year left in college hockey, and then he's coming over anyway.
Yeah, it looks like, he has a really good shot. So it's kind of interesting to see what happens.
So good in that dev camp.
Yep.
His shooting was... Some of these guys at dev camp, man, we'll talk about him later, but like Bobby Brink looked awesome.
Yeah.
We're forgetting. I think people are so not enamored, but like focused on this rebuild thing, that I think people are forgetting that they're not so much on defense, but at forward, it's actually a pretty good prospect pool here of young talent. It's not like you're not looking at that offense and going, oh, this is a disaster. Healthy, they're actually really not that bad.
It's pretty just the defense that's lacking, as you said, obviously.
Yeah. And that's going to take time. It's going to stop them from being ultimately competitive. But, as far as being able to produce some offense and attack, I mean, this is not a bad squad for that. This is not bad potential for that.
Yeah, down the line.
Yeah. Especially where, with Gauthier and, Michkov, like you add those two guys into this crop. This is actually kind of a scoring team. A lot of shooters all of a sudden.
Yeah.
All right. Let's move forward with our next topic. And this one I just want to touch on quickly, and then we'll get into the good stuff with Gauthier. But Cutter Gauthier was quoted something along the lines by Adam Kimmelman, where he was talking to Danny Briere. And it's kind of rehashing that same story when Cutter Gauthier didn't show up for Dev Camp. He just kind of talked about it himself from Cutter's side, where he said, I know that it wasn't Danny Briere's favorite thing, but it's something I decided that was best for me. And I think a lot of people just jump to a worry, like he's not going to sign his ELC or something like that. Guys, he's playing already right now. Like, if you think about him being at Dev Camp, that is like no time off. I mean, you're talking about no time off all summer. Maybe it did piss off Danny Briere to some extent. But again, the kid's got leverage. He knows this. He's an NCAA player. They obviously won him. he didn't need the dev camp. It's not like if he didn't go to dev camp, he wasn't going to be an NHL player. He's already playing against men. And I don't know. I just don't think it's that big of a deal. I think, yeah, ultimately, in retrospect, I think he would even think maybe I should have gone. I don't think he was like dead set, like, oh, forget that place. I think it was more just like, hey, maybe I can skip this one, do the USA thing. I'll be with the Flyers from here on out anyway. So, what am I really missing? I think that was kind of his logic. Like, do I need another dev camp? I was at it last year. I know what they're going to tell me. Even if that's wrong, I can see why a 19-year-old kid would rationalize that with no vacation and playing hockey all year round, which, by the way, he's playing right now. And then he's going to go to college and start again. It's just going to be nonstop hockey. So I don't know. I just don't see that big of a deal. Do you?
Yeah, I think it's a bit overblown. I think obviously in a slow period like we're in right now with limited Flyers news, you have tidbits like this kind of come up and get pushed to the forefront where regularly if the team was playing or, if something was kind of going on here, you wouldn't really make such of a huge deal about this. I think obviously the main thing is, Danny Briere, wasn't happy that Gauthier didn't attend. Any GM, any employer wouldn't be happy in that situation, right? So like it's understandable from his perspective, but from Gauthier's perspective, it's also very understandable because he played in the NCAA all season, played at the World Juniors, played at the World Championships, played in the playoffs, even in the NCAA as well. Yep. And then now he's at the World Junior Summer Showcase. And I believe he scored 2 goals in a game just the other night. Here, and he had a really good release. I think it was against Sweden. But yeah, so he's in the summer showcase. So realistically, if he would have went to that dev camp, he would have really only had like 2-3 weeks until he's going to the showcase again. So I understand it from his perspective. You need to have a bit of an off season and time to recharge as a player in general. So I have no qualms with it, right? Like he goes to the summer.
He has one opportunity to do. Too.
Yeah.
Right. Like if he doesn't do it this year, the World Junior Champion, he's not doing it again.
Yeah, right? Exactly. Right. So he's going to the summer showcase. That, is a prelude to him being on the World Junior team for the US later in December as the season progresses. So it only makes sense. And I mean, the college season is going to start fairly shortly as well after this. So once again, there's not much of a break here. So I personally think the kid played a ton of hockey this season, and him not going to a week-long development camp where, quite frankly, he was probably above and beyond a lot of the talent there. That's not the attitude you want to have, but like it's the truth, right? So I just think it's blown out of proportion, and it's not anything to look into that like, oh, this means he doesn't want to sign his ELC or anything like that. I think that's total nonsense. So
yeah, I don't think anything like that is happening. I think in some respect, maybe he's like, oh, maybe I should have gone, but again, everything else he did, he has one last chance of doing. Dev camp, this is not going to be the last of you. They're going to ask him to go to dev camp again next year. Most likely.
Yeah, exactly. So
most likely he's going to have to go again next year. So like, I don't know. I just don't care that much. The good news, you mentioned it already, Cutter Gauthier. Now, Team USA, I think they did start off poorly, but then a couple back-to-back wins against Finland and Sweden.
At the summer showcase, there's 2 teams as well. Like it's a Team USA blue, a Team USA white. So they're kind of split up a bit. So I think one team did really bad, while the other one did really good or something like that.
Yeah, that's most likely the case. And I know that in the Sweden game, they won 7-1. Gauthier had 2 goals in that. You can go check out Nasty Knuckles' Twitter handle. They have nice highlights of both goals on there. Again, just shooting prowess. Actually, the one that he scored on the 2-on-1 was just... it's a goal where it's like, I'm better than you. Like
goal scorer's goal. He's coming down the wing, but the impressive thing
got
is
out of the box too.
Yeah, he just releases it really quick. And I mean, if we look at the NHL right now and all the most successful goal scorers, what they have in common, they get the puck off their sticks like that. And Gauthier, that seems to be a facet in his game that he's relying upon. So it's good. It's a good thing that you see a trait like that at lower levels. And you hope to see it kind of come to the forefront when he makes it to the NHL eventually, right?
Yeah. And I think it's important for people to realize his potential is also a superstar. Like he is slightly more risky than a Michkov from a talent standpoint, but he has so many physical gifts that Michkov does not. Just the sheer size in which he skates.
Skating for the size as well.
I just noticed that a lot of people are only talking about Michkov, and I get it. Like we're kind of, we're in love with Michkov too. But let's not forget that it's both of them. It was Mike Richards and Jeff Carter that showed up. People loved Mike Richards. He was the leader of the team, but Jeff Carter actually produced more points and scored more goals. So it's like, the whole thing is just, let's just remember that there's 2 stars coming, and not everything has to look so clear with one of them. Like, people already didn't have enough faith in Cutter Gauthier when he was drafted. He's exceeded expectations, and people, I feel like, are still hesitant to call him a potential superstar, but that's what he is. If you're enamored by Cooley, if you're enamored by any of these guys who have the ability to put up 50, 60 points as a rookie, he's in that group. So I don't know. I just want to make that clear that we're not just talking about Michkov when it comes to stars on this team. I don't know why I'm not even going to say fan base. I'll say the podcast here have decided to label anybody that they want as second line pairing, second line guys. This is all arbitrary nonsense. I'll be honest with you. I hear people say this stuff. I'm like, none of this matters. None of it. Carter Verhaeghe is not a top line forward. He's a 40 goal scorer. Like, I don't care what anybody's labeling anybody. I am so uninterested in any of that. I talk about it all the time. If you can play a top line role, you're a top line player. It's not defined by the fan base or if you put up 20 more points than the other top line player. It's, can you play against the best players in the world and come out on top? At least partial of the time, 50% of the time, something like that. 49, that makes you a top line player if you can play against them. So I don't know. I don't want to forget that with Cutter Gauthier. And I feel like it's already kind of being forgotten, but he's going to show up first. So, everybody's going to get enamored with Gauthier, and then Michkov's going to come, and they're all going to forget about Gauthier within a second. And that'll be annoying. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll see what happens there. I mean, I think it's just a wait and see. He's a young guy. Who knows what he's going to do at the NHL level at this point, right?
Yeah.
It's all relative, really.
I mean, he's already crushing it, though. So let's see where he goes. All right. Let's get into our last segment here. And this is kind of something I came up with today as we were writing this up. The idea here is just, these are question marks going into the season. These are things that hold the team back to some degree, or at least the team it's an X factor, let's say this way, on the year. So we'll talk about each one of those. I'm sure there's more than what I came up with. We'll talk about those, and then we'll talk about, is there a backup plan for it, right? Is there an option beyond that player or that issue, or how do we plan to address this going forward? So the first one is Owen Tippett, and the obvious one is, can he continue to score? Will the scoring increase? Everybody talks about him as a 30-goal scorer. I'm hoping for more even, but he is on track to be a 30-goal scorer right now, just based off his previous season. Maybe he'll build on top of that. I think he can absolutely do it. I expect him to score this year. I don't expect him to take a step back or anything like that. So I think this question mark will be addressed, but my backup for it, and this is why I wanted to do this, because I want people to see that, you go in with a plan, but there always needs to be something behind that. You always need to be able to pivot to put somebody else in there. And it's why we make these lineup projections, and they're never really like what the coach exactly puts out there. They're always slightly different. And then as the season, they change. So my backup there is Tyson Forrester, right? If for some reason Owen Tippett is a 20-goal scorer, he's not going to get much better, even for the year. He doesn't do much better. He's like the same. Okay, well, you have a Tyson Forrester coming up. And if you're missing goal scoring, right, that is a guy that maybe will make up the difference for you. And I think it's really nice to see. And this is kind of what I meant with the depth. I mean, there's even more names beyond that, but just in the immediate, it's really nice to see when you have Travis Konechny up top, Owen Tippett number 2, and for some reason Tippett even gets injured or whatever, Tyson Forrester can step right back into that. What do you think?
Yeah, so for not for Forster, for Tippett, and can the scoring continue? I think yes, definitely.
Yep.
I do believe he'll probably be within the 25 to 35 goal range. I mean, the 35 would be the higher end of that. But if you look at his season last year, he had, I believe, was it 28 or 27 goals? Something like that. But yeah, so either 28 or 27. Either way, I mean, that's a pretty big total for a guy really playing in his first full
27.
First full 82 game season to have 27 goals like that. So I think he's going to continue to get more opportunities. And I also go back to the fact that there's a lot of games where he was hitting a ton of posts or getting a ton of breakaways, and there was a lot of times where he was creating a lot of scoring chances but just wasn't finishing. And I think that was earlier in the season as well. Like as the season kind of elapsed, he was figuring out how to beat goalies at the NHL level cleaner. He's figuring out what he needs to do with his shot release to switch up to kind of beat them in different scenarios, things like that. So I think kind of as he's getting more accustomed to the NHL level and he's getting into these opportunities, he's going to be more familiarized with what he needs to do to actually finish on these chances that he's creating. So personally, I mean, I think he's going to smash 27 goals next season. Like I think he's going to get 30 plus. I think between 30 35 most likely. That's my prediction for it. Obviously, though, if knock on wood, I mean, there's always injuries. Anything can happen in hockey, so who knows? Like Forster, I like as your kind of backup option that you mentioned here. Yariv, I mean, he's a similar player in terms of the fact that he has a really nice shot, just like Tippett does. So if you're looking for somebody, let's say, to pick up slack there, if there's a cold streak or let's say something happens, it could be Forster. Another guy I would look to too, that's more of a veteran, is maybe Cam Atkinson. He wasn't around last season. So if there's something that's happening with Tippett in terms of cold spells or he's not producing at the same rate, I think Atkinson's probably going to be one of the guys they look toward, just being an older guy on the team and being a guy that Tortorella obviously loves. So
yeah, and I think Atkinson, the only reason I didn't list him is because of the injuries, but I do have him,
who knows if he's going to be back.
I have him in the other one of the scenarios. I was trying to think, because I like what you said, right? Like the big body of Tippett, the big shot, that's what you got in Tyson Forrester. Not the exact same type of player, but Atkinson is much more similar to Konechny than he is a Tippett, right, in the playing style. So that's what I was trying to think, right? And we even showed the power play, right? If Tippett can't play that off wing, maybe that's something they try Forrester in if he's NHL ready, right? Even to start the year. I suspect we'll see that stuff in preseason. All right, the next guy I have is Morgan Frost. Can he continue his scoring streak, right? We just talked about this. Is he that guy? Is he going to be playing third or second line? What happens if he gets an injury? What happens if he doesn't start the season with the Flyers? He still has contract disputes. Just throwing that out there. This is the way I was. One, I definitely think the kid can do it. I think the way he looked, I think he deserves all the credit that maybe not where Owen Tippett was, but if we believe in a lot of these young guys, I mean, Frost did so many great things in the second half of the year. Should not be ignored. He wasn't just good against bad teams. There were nights where he looked like one of our best players. And there were nights that Tippett did that. There were nights where Tippett looked like our best player, clear cut, when we had all those injuries. But there were nights where Frost was all over the ice. Where I think things could change for him if something happens, let's say he doesn't play center, let's say he has an injury or something. What I thought of is we're not really counting on Bobby Brink, right? But I look at the option with Bobby Brink. Let's just say Frost is out for the year, right? Let's just say, right? Bad thing happens, he's out for the year. Bobby Brink shifting over Lawton to center. You bring up a guy like Bobby Brink who can play make, who can really move the puck, has a lot of similar attributes offensively, the stick handling as Morgan Frost. I think between those two guys, I think you can put together something comparable to make up for that scoring. And that's kind of what I thought of. And I don't think anybody's really talking about Bobby Brink making this team, but it should be expected that as the AHL season rolls on, I mean, the guy's gonna make noise. So I just thought it'd be a good time to bring up Bobby Brink as another potential power play guy, as another guy who can score, as another guy who's wiry and shifty and can move the puck and do playmaking and play driving that a lot of the other players on this team can't do. So I thought with the two of those, that'd be a good backup. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. I think Frost does have the opportunity to continue what he was doing last season, how he ended the season. I think for him, a lot of it is the confidence. It's clear that when he's confident in his abilities and he has confidence and he's playing with confidence, that he's a night and day player from when he's not, right? Like if you look at the beginning of the season, you can tell he doesn't have confidence with the puck on his stick. He's not confident in his touches. As the season progresses and the coach favors him more, you see that rise. So I think it does have something to do with Tortorella as well here. Like I think he needs to walk a fine line. Obviously, Frost needs to earn his ice time, but in a sense, I mean, the way he played last season, I think he did earn a spot in this middle six here. So I expect him to get, the opportunities to start. And if he starts off well, he's going to continue to get those. But we know how Tortorella is. And if, he starts off cold, he's going to take it away from him right away. So that's kind of what I want to,
immediately.
yeah, it's kind of what I'm interested to see, right? Like if something like that does occur, how does he bounce back? How does he react? I think that will be a
Good
big
point.
sign. That'll be a big sign into like, can he continue it, right? Because if that happens to him, he doesn't bounce back right away and doesn't react in a positive manner. I don't know if he will be able to continue it because it might be hard for him to gain that level of trust back. So we'll see. I think he will. I think he's gonna have a good season next season, in my opinion. I'm not going to put like a prediction in terms of points or anything like that, but I think he'll be a mainstay for the Flyers in the middle six, whether that's, second line, third line center. I think he's going to get the opportunities and kind of build off the consistency that he showed at the end of last year. For Bobby Brink, though, if something does go awry here, I mean, that's a good backup just because of the fact that I think Brink has a lot of underrated playmaking ability. Like he's known, obviously, as somebody who can score goals. He has a good shot too, but he is somebody who kind of works out of the corners, has known to be a power play producer, can create plays and has vision on the ice. So in a sense that you could look at that as kind of a replacement for what Frost brings. They have a lot of the same similar qualities in terms of just like the way they play make and look for other teammates and try to kind of control the puck and get defenses focused on them to open up other teammates for opportunities and in those soft spaces. So that's a good comparison and backup to bring up. Scott Laughton as well, obviously. I mean, we know that Tortorella used him like a Swiss Army knife. So I think if Frost stumbles for any reason, you can put old reliable Scott Laughton in there to take those minutes, and you know what he's going to give you, and it's going to be consistent on a night-to-night basis. Versus, if Frost isn't showing that consistency, I could see Tortorella going to Laughton instead of Brink for that reason, because he knows that, okay, with another younger guy in Brink, maybe the same thing will happen. Whereas with Laughton, I don't have to kind of deal with that, right?
Yeah. And I think, I think there's options there. And, you like to think that there are other young guys on the Phantoms with offensive upside. Elliot Denoyer being one of them. But I think ultimately, like, Brink is by far the most talented we have down there from an offensive ceiling. So I kind of see him as being the next Frost, right? The next guy we have down there, as that we're kind of itching to get up to see what he can do offensively.
Yeah.
All right. Next guy I have, and this is the big one. We've talked about him nonstop. Sean Couturier. Will he recover? This one I think is still a question mark. Still really, I'm optimistic over what we saw at the end of last season. Him, practicing with the team, ready to go, and the team just held him back anyway. So, I do expect him to come in, have a normal preseason and get to it. But if it doesn't, the backup is pretty obvious. It's Noah Cates. And he already did it last year. He'll play a bigger role if Couturier is not in there. But then my other thought was, and this was, I mentioned Scott Laughton earlier, but, if Sean Couturier's career is done, I'm just saying, let's talk worst case scenario. Elliot Denoyer, I think that's a player that maybe the Flyers want to keep Laughton on the wing, right? Because their left wing is not that strong. Maybe it's an opportunity to give Elliot Denoyer more time in the NHL, playing a third line role. I don't think they want to put him on the fourth line so much, but if Couturier is not here, I could see a scenario. Again, him and Laughton are pretty similar. And if, for some reason he's out full time, I think the combination of those two guys helps at least replace what Coots does, considering they're both two-way physical centers.
Yeah. Obviously for Couturier, it's hard to know. I mean, if he is recovered or not, it's really the epitome of a wait and see situation. Like once training camp comes around and once there's preseason games, we'll see if he suits up, right? And that'll be our telling point as to, can he recover? I think the main thing will be okay, sure, he gets back, he starts playing in games, but can he sustain his health long term here? And I think that's obviously with two back surgeries is what the Flyers are looking to find out, right? Like, sure, Couturier might be able to come back, but is he going to be able to stay healthy, right? Over an 82 game season, we just don't know yet. It has to basically unfold and we have to see if his body can really handle it, because it's tough, right, to play 82 games in the NHL. It's a rigorous schedule. It's very many games in a compacted amount of time usually. So we'll see what happens. I mean, I want to be optimistic and say that like I think he'll make it back, but obviously there's no way of us to really know. But we'll see. I do think, though, you're 100% right there. Obviously, Noah Cates is the perfect backup. Just if you look at the defensive game of Couturier, the defensive game of Cates, it's essentially very parallel at a very young age, right? Like we saw Cates last season, just what he was doing defensively, and immediately the light bulb kind of goes off in our brain saying, well, he reminds us of a young Couturier, right?
Yep.
Just with the responsibilities that he's taking on. Desnoyers is definitely an interesting thought as well, Yariv. I mean, if you look at what his game is supposed to be about, typically he has been projected to be that like third line shutdown type center. I think there's more offensive upside there, and we've kind of seen that with his first AHL season. So there might be more untapped potential for the Flyers to potentially develop. I do think if Couturier is out and can't play for a long period of time at any point this season, I don't know if we'll see Desnoyers right away, but Tortorella seemed to like him for the short stint that he had last year, and kind of liked the attitude that he brought. So I think just with the nature of where the Flyers are at, right, like they'll probably try him. I don't know how long of a period it might be, but it obviously depends on his play. But I definitely think Desnoyers will be in the mix if Couturier for some reason can't play.
Yeah. And, again, it's nice to see that the Flyers aren't going to be devoid of centermen if Coots isn't okay, right? They're not going to have trouble icing centermen.
Yeah.
And ones that are worth watching, for one reason or another. All right. Next one we have is Cam Atkinson, very similar to Sean Couturier. Is he still able to play? I'd say he's more of a risk from the standpoint that we haven't seen him practicing. But maybe less of a risk just because not two back surgeries together. The backup for this one, I do expect him to play. I think it's one of those things that if it's an issue where he has like uncomfortability as the season goes on, then we'll know. But I think he'll start the season no matter what. And the backup for him, and this was a weird one for me, and you can't really replace Atkinson on this team as we saw last year. Like, we don't really have another one because it's not, I mean, it's TK, right? But TK plays a level above him. So really what I saw was Garrett Hathaway. And this is a situation where I do think Garrett Hathaway plays a big role in this team, where he's a guy who's going to be put in a lot of places, somewhere fans might not even like it, but he is going to be very adequate defensively. He's going to be very physical, and he's going to bring a lot of that edge and the little things that Atkinson does. Garrett Hathaway will bring that. So in that respective backup for the defensive role, for the penalty killing, for the leadership, that's where I see Garrett Hathaway being a backup for Cam Atkinson, because I don't really know if the Flyers have a replacement for him. It'd really just be like Bobby Brink, right? Like kind of what I mentioned earlier. It'd be like, okay, we mix it up with, we split up the role, right? A Scott Lawton, a Bobby Brink, or whatever. I just think he's one of those players that like we just don't really have a backup for him where he is right now in his career and the role that he plays on this team. It's kind of like we haven't even had him for a year. So I kind of see it as like Garrett Hathaway is the guy who automatically takes a lot of those Atkinson role stuff that defensively and in the locker room.
Yeah, Atkinson's kind of the same situation as Couturier, right? Like we are unaware of, what his status really is. We haven't really seen much of him on the ice in the past year. So it's once again another wait and see. Like once camp rolls around, we'll see if he's on the ice. I believe he's playing in some sort of a like summer hockey league in Columbus or something like that. But I mean, who really knows? That's not really a full tilt thing. So you won't really know until he starts taking contact on that arm with the sciatica, and how it's going to hold up and if he can actually stay healthy, because he might come back, but there's no guarantee with injury like that you're going to be able to stay healthy for an 82 game season. So we'll see there. In terms of the backups, I mean, Garnett Hathaway makes sense, just due to the penalty killing. Obviously, the scoring prowess, Garnett Hathaway doesn't really match up. But defensively, I definitely get the suggestion. Bobby Brink makes sense from the offensive standpoint, less of the defensive standpoint. I think, to be honest, Joel Farabee.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, you're right.
Joel Farabee would be a good backup just for the fact that like point. He might be able to score as much for you as Atkinson typically would, and he can also play PK as well,
Yep.
and has more of a defensive prowess. So maybe that would be more of a similar guy, just in terms of like how Atkinson's play style set up. But for the penalty killing prowess, I mean, Garnet Hathaway is a better penalty killer than Farabee is at this point in his career.
Yeah.
So for strictly that and the veteran presence type of thing, obviously Garnet Hathaway is the backup in that sense. But I think we'll have to see with Atkinson.
I think you're right. I think it's between I think you're right. I think Farabee will take on some of those minutes if he's not around.
Yeah, exactly. Hathaway too. I think for Atkinson, I'm more interested to see, like, okay, if he does get back, what does he look like out there?
Yeah,
Because I mean,
a little bit.
he's a smaller guy. I mean, obviously, it's tougher to play in a league like the NHL when you're 5'8" like he is. It's never been a issue for him before, but when you have that arm injury and you lose strength in that area, who knows, how it's going to affect you. Plus, he's already 34 years old. He's getting up there in age. So I just, even if he makes it back, I'm kind of interested to see if he's still that same player that he used to be, right?
He is a player that if he was on LTIR for the whole season, I wouldn't be shocked.
Yeah.
Just because of where he is in his career, the fact he's 34, is this career threatening? I don't, is it worth it for me to even grit out another year if it's going to be permanent damage? I don't know. But I hope he does come back, because he was really great in his time here when he did play.
He's good for the young guys.
Yeah.
Too, so
he's a good fit, and we haven't even seen him under Torts yet. And that was like Torts' biggest advocate to get him. Yeah. God, what a weird goddamn time this is for the Flyers. It's like so many players missing. Like I've never really experienced this. At least like the last time I experienced like these injury woes is like maybe the Chris Pronger era, where like Pronger and the team was kind of collapsing. And then there was the Eric Lindros story, obviously. But like now it's like, I feel like there's 3 of these a year, at this point.
Like, I feel like Gagne, Forsberg, Primo era.
Gagne had a year, yep, with the back injury, the neck back injury he had too.
That was all in the same kind of time period. Like Gagne was really hurt. Forsberg with the foot. Primo was supposed to come back, but he had all the concussions. So, yeah.
But there was always like one. Now I feel like there's 3, like always. But maybe that's just perception,
Yeah.
Like, because we are not even talking about Ryan Ellis. Like that's not even a conversation that already happened.
Well, he's on
our books though.
He's not around. I don't think we're ever going to see him. But
it's crazy. That's one of the craziest ones, dude.
100%. Yeah.
That's one of the craziest contracts we've ever traded for. All right. Let's move on to the next one. All right, this is a big one. Again, we kind of touched on all of these already, but we'll touch on them again. The next one is Carter Hart. With him, the only real question mark is not his play. It's not even really his health, even though, he's had a few injury issues. But it's really this Hockey Canada thing. Something happens. I mean, we don't know. I don't see the Flyers planning 100% like he's gone or anything like that. It's just we really don't know. I suspect he will be here. Just my gut, but I don't know. And I'll say this. I mean, as far as backups go, when it comes to this season, it's obviously Samuel Ersson. Yes, we have other options, but everybody knows that it's going to be Ersson and be like, all right, we're going to give it to him now, because he's going to be the best one. He's going to be the best goalie. And I can't see Tortorella dropping him for fear of waivers of Pettersson or Sandstrom. You know what I mean? Excuse me. And then the next one, if you look at it, if let's just say worst case scenario, Hart's career is over. Let's say he's going to jail. I don't know. I don't think that's going to happen, to make that clear. But, let's say he's gone completely or serious injury or something. Next year, Ersan Kolosov, you look at just Ersan, it makes you nervous. But if you roll out Ersan Kolosov next year, let's just say I'm saying Hart's gone. Well, that's a really powerful young tandem. And that changes the story, even perception around the league. So I think the Flyers are actually in a really good place with goaltending. And for a year, they're not competing with a humongous risk over their franchise player right now, quite frankly. They could be in a worse spot. And I think Sam Ersson, I don't know if he projects to be Carter Hart, but he definitely projects to be a damn good goalie. So I think for this year, we'd be okay. It would be Ersson. And then next year, I think Ersan Kolosov potentially, I think Kolosov would be a starter on the AHL maybe. But again, with those two names, it'd be similar to having Ersan this past year where, yeah, he was our AHL goalie, but we knew he was the number 2 in the system.
Yeah, I mean, obviously with the Hart situation, nobody could really give a concrete comment just because we don't know what's happening. It's under investigation. Eventually, Hockey Canada is going to release their findings. I mean, I think there's rumblings that it's coming soon. Likely, the NHL, just for PR reasons and publicity, they're going to try to release it at the most dead point of the season or of their off season. So that I'm guessing is going to be some point in August, right? They kind of want to get this news out when nobody's paying attention to the NHL and paying attention to hockey.
What does that tell you?
I mean, who knows? Like, I just think they don't want eyes on the league in a negative manner. But I do think something like this happening, I mean, should be brought to the forefront, and people should be aware of it because obviously doing things like this aren't something that should
talk about it. The media
not something that should happen, right? Like, in terms of who's involved, we have no idea. Like, is Hart involved? Who knows? I believe, innocent until named, right? So, like, until he's named, I'm not going to assume that he's not going to be around. So, I'll say that he's going to be around for now. If for some reason he's not, I think you hit the nail on the head, Yariv. I mean, Ersan, we know how much Tortorella really likes him. He started off his career tremendously at the NHL level, had a great AHL season. I think, he's pretty much penciled into the backup role. The only reason I could see it differently is for some reason, let's say, Cal Peterson or Sandstrom play really well, and they're saying, well, Ersan's still young. We want him to get more games and have him start in the AHL. It's the only caveat I see. But I do think that Tortorella really wants Ersan in, and he thinks that he kind of deserved it after last season's performance. So we'll see what happens, obviously, and see what goes on. I mean, Kolosov is very interesting too. He's going to be playing with Dynamo Minsk this upcoming season in the KHL, but he should be coming over to the Phantoms at least next season. So if Hart is gone, I think the Flyers are in a good position. I mean, you have Ersan, who looks like a good goalie prospect. You have Kolosov, who's played amongst men in the KHL for seasons at this point, and you have 2 young goalies you just drafted recently in this past draft. So I think in terms of goalie depth, the Flyers prospect pool is probably the best that it's been in decades at this point, right?
Yeah, just building on what Hextall did, and I think it's why it's really important they drafted 2 goalies. It's like, let's continue this success we've had with goalies. Let's continue to develop them. At worst, we trade them and get 2nd, 3rd round picks for them, right? Yeah, I'm loving that part of it. All right, next one we have, and this one is a big one. I'd say maybe this might even be the biggest X factor to the team. Is Travis Sanheim. Can he handle a bigger role? We've talked about it over and over again. He's going to be playing more minutes. This is the first time he's been here without Ivan Provorov. And I think the obvious backup, and we talked about that over and over again, it's Cam York. Immediately, if Sanheim is not able to play this, Cam York's going to be elevated. It already happened last year. It already happened to Sanheim last year when he wasn't able to perform to his usual level. And I suspect they'll try to start him on a clean slate again. Hope that he can play his best hockey. They're not going to look for perfection. I don't think if he struggles in some fans' eyes, they're going to give up on him. I think to the expectations they have of him. But I do think Cam York is right there to step up afterwards. And I think that's actually a pretty good thing. I mean, it's not that terrible that you have Travis Sanheim you developed who has talent, and then right behind him, your young star defenseman. So not the worst case thing, but I think a huge season for him. I'm not 100% sure because just like Frost, Sanheim is such a confidence-driven player that I do worry that maybe he won't find that under Tortorella. But I still believe in his game. It's just his mental aspect of the game that I worry about with him under Tortorella. And in that case, we'll have conversations about him probably leaving town. But I do think he has a lot more to give, and I'm not ready to give up on Travis Sanheim, not at 27 years old.
Yeah, Sanheim, can he play a bigger role? I think he's going to be forced to play one, essentially, right? Like, whether he likes it or not, he's going to kind of be thrust into that to start the season, and it's going to be really a sink or swim situation. Like, he's either going to do well, and he's going to keep continuing to get that usage, or not, and then you see a guy like Cam York get more minutes potentially, maybe even Rasmus Ristolainen kind of gets thrust into more minutes because I know Tortorella really relied on him heavily, at least defensively last season. For Sanheim, though, one thing I did want to bring up is in that season where, he had his best essentially season points wise, he was playing in a first pair role almost with Ivan Provorov. And he played his best hockey. Obviously, he's playing alongside Provorov, so that helps. But maybe with the extra, usage, the extra minutes, it sparks something in him to perform better because he knows the team is kind of relying on him and needs him. But we'll see. Sometimes the pressure can work the opposite way, and it might have a negative effect. So, um, will he play a bigger role? I think definitely yes. Will he succeed in that bigger role? I don't know. I think that's more of a wait and see situation. And then the backup, yeah, I think Cam York, Ristolainen. I think even Emil Andre. I mean, if he makes the team, we might see him get some of the more offensive starts that Sanheim used to get, or offensive type of usage if he's really struggling a lot. But I'm definitely interested to see how Sanheim plays because I think, like you were saying, his play does dictate a lot of how the Flyers are going to be perceived and what they will be this season. If he's really bad, I mean, chances are they're going to be a bottom five team. If he's really good, they might be in that kind of 10 to 15 range. We'll see, obviously.
A lot definitely hinges on him. And that goes to our next one, Cam York. Will Cam York continue his trajectory up? And the one thing I want to bring up on here is, you mentioned Ivan Provorov. I think people misconstrued what happened last year. I noticed a lot of people are like, oh, Provorov is doing well because he's playing with Cam York. No. Yes, it helped because Cam York was playing well in his position, but Provorov still had the tougher minutes. He had the tougher assignments. He had the defensive zone starts. This is not something that York will have the luxury of having Provorov with him. Either he'll be with Ristolainen in these scenarios, or Sean Walker, or I don't even know. Like, I really don't know. Maybe he'll be with Sanheim. Who knows at this point? But I do think he can excel. Just, I'm interested to see what he does, and as well as everybody else, without the best defenseman that this team has had the entire time that he was here. People can shit on Provorov all you want, but he was still better than the other options available. The backup, you mentioned him earlier, Emil Andre, right? A little bit smaller than York, but similar offensive gifts, similar defensive game, has a two-way game for a smaller guy. I don't think he'll necessarily 100% fill Cam York, but if Cam York for some reason is not on this team, Emil Andre is the guy who would jump into that role. The caveat to that is maybe it's Igor Zamula if he rebounds, but I see him, maybe that should have been my Sanheim backup because that's a guy who obviously has similar gifts to Sanheim. And maybe that's a guy who, between the two of them, he's kind of rolled up in there,
That's an interesting point to make. I think you're definitely right there. Like with York, playing with Provorov really helped him. I mean, you're playing with a veteran, a guy who has played against the top players in the league, for years on end, essentially since he came into the league, and now you're no longer going to be playing with that guy, and that was essentially his main partner really for last season. So I am interested to see how he adapts without Provorov, because I think there'll be more defensive heavy lifting placed on York, versus Provorov, who kind of handled that last season. So we'll see. I mean, York has shown that he is a little bit underrated in terms of his defensive game. Like, I think he has a good stick in terms of like breaking up board play and gapping up when I think forwards are rushing in across the blue line against him. But he's never been known to be defensive stalwart or anything like that. He's always been good, but not like the elite part of his game. The elite part of his game has always been his passing, his IQ, his ability to move the puck up in transition, right? So I think with the fact that there's really no like bona fide defensive defenseman on this roster, like you can say Ristolainen is a defensive defenseman, sure, but other than last, Yeah, Sean Walker, but other than he's only really a third pair guy. He's not
Right.
somebody you want on your first pair with Cam York. So that's where I kind of look at this, and it is a bit troublesome and a bit worrying because you don't want to have a young defenseman on an island on a really bad team because that can kind of fuck their whole development up essentially,
You
right?
see that
So
all over the NHL.
yeah, so I think with York, they're going to really need to be careful in terms of like how they deploy him, how they use him next season, just due to that. Like he's still super young.
Mm-hmm.
You can, with a young player like that, the confidence is very fragile. So I'm interested to see how the coaching staff handles it because Sanheim is not a defensive defenseman at all. So he's not going to be able to bail York out in these situations. Ristolainen, though he improved, his defense was largely critiqued, other than last season. So like he's not one that typically can bail you out of those situations. So I'm not really sure who they're going to play with him or who really matches up to play with York right now. I'm very interested to see. Maybe they go with a younger pairing, like if Andre makes the team, maybe they put them together. I don't
That's a
know.
pretty small pairing.
It is, yeah. I just wonder, like, who else? Like, I just don't like the idea of Sean Walker and York together, to be honest with you.
That's
But
where I thought maybe Stahl's gonna play.
okay, yeah. I'm forgetting
Just because of the
Stahl.
leadership.
Yeah,
Yeah, he's also not going to be that high impact of a player.
that
You
too,
know what I
right?
mean?
So
But he does bring a leadership element that the other defensemen don't have. And that, you look at Cam York, a former captain of Team USA, not a bad idea to give him, a leader to kind of learn from, to sponge from. But you could say the same thing about Travis Sanheim.
yeah,
I could see Sanheim playing with Stahl. Like it could be Stahl, Sanheim as a pairing,
and
and
then
then Risto,
Ristolainen
York,
and York. Yeah,
and then
I think I'd
Walker with
be.
Andre or Sealer or something.
To be honest, Yariv, I think for his development, Ristolainen is probably
The
his
best for
best
York.
partner. Yeah,
Yeah, I think so too. The
just
way
to
the way
help
we
him
brought him in for
defensively.
Sanheim, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, and he helps compensate for the fact that York is only 5'11". He's not like he's kind of got that chemo teaming in lower body strength, but Risto's 6'5".
yeah. When you have a big 6'5"
So
finished
is Stahl
defenseman, yeah. When you have a big 6'5" finished defenseman like Risto, who's gonna
with an
hit a
edge.
guy into the
Yeah.
boards without any hesitation to help you out. I think that's a good thing for a guy like York to have
I
with
think
him.
there might
So
be something to what I'm saying here. Like maybe Stahl does play with Sanheim.
yeah, maybe I'm
Just
interested.
because you look at Sanheim's again, like going back to what I said, like the fact that he has such confidence issues, and it's obvious to me, that he's so confidence driven. You bring in a guy like Stahl. Stahl's been a guy who got a lot of ridicule everywhere he went, but has just continued his career. He's like never slowed down. I remember the people made fun of Detroit for bringing him in, that he was done, and he's obviously not done, and he wasn't done after that, and he's still not done today. He just seems like a guy who perseveres.
Yeah,
All the Stahl brothers are kind of like that. They all have great attitudes, all three brothers. And I'm kind of like, maybe that's something, Provorov, I love him, but he wasn't picking up his teammates around
yeah.
him. And that's my criticize of him. And I mean that emotionally too. But maybe Stahl is good for that, I think that's why they signed him. So
Veteran presence, Yariv.
I think it would be an interesting thing to see Sanheim with like a vet with pedigree, with like a name.
Yeah.
To see if, the same way we put Niskin in with Provorov, right? Like maybe that'll be some of the thought there. All right, let's get into, we have 3 left. Next one, big name, Travis Konechny. Well, let's be honest. TK hit a level last year that none of us saw before from
Point
him.
per game level, basically.
Point per game, 40 goal pace. I personally believe that that's what Travis Konechny is, an 80 to 100 point player on a top line, depending on the quality of line mates that he has. I expect him to do it again next year, potentially even better. If the team is healthy, if he plays with Sean Couturier, I think he has a better season than last year. The backup there, again, the only backup I can really think of is Owen Tippett, right? For some reason, if TK is unavailable or if he is struggling, your next man up is Owen Tippett.
Well, yeah.
Your next comparable to him is Cam Atkinson, right? There's obviously, we mentioned Tyson Forrester, but I think that immediately projects Owen Tippett into the top line role for whatever reason.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think Konechny kind of showed last year that he can reach that point a game level again. I mean, he was almost on a similar pace a couple of years ago, and then COVID happened. So it's not like an anomaly, whereas he wasn't, on similar paces before, where he's going to score 30 goals plus, things like that. So I think, there's a good chance that he's going to produce to a point of game level once again, just for the sheer fact that he's going to be placed in all, the prime offensive opportunities. He's going to be used like, the X factor essentially for them on the ice in terms of power play time, first line minutes offensively, as long as, things are going in the right direction for the team here. And obviously him and Tortorella have a good relationship, it seems. So I think, he's poised probably to be close to a point a game again, if not even over that. Playing with Couturier obviously would help him immensely. I mean, I think playing with Couturier, if he can get back to that level that he was before the injury, that's going to help any player. So it totally makes sense. If he's not around, Tippett is a no-brainer, obviously, just due to the fact that, I mean, there's no other player on the team that I think has a 30-goal plus ceiling for next season other than Tippett. So it makes sense just
maybe
due to that.
Atkinson, but again, it would have to be the injury, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Caveat with him.
But I do think for Tippett
too, I do want to give him credit too. We just
potentially, yeah,
he's got to. Yeah,
I think Farabey's more 20 to 30, whereas Tippett, like, I think 30 plus is more of a realistic kind of a possibility for him. But if you look at Tippett, they kind of used him as Konechny's replacement last season, right? Like Konechny got hurt against Calgary near the end of the year, and Tippett got all the same usage Konechny got, all that first power play time. He was on, the first line. So I think Tortorella's already kind of used him like that as a Konechny replacement. So if it has to happen again, I think there's no issue to kind of throw him into that role.
Yeah. I do want to give a shout out though to, Farabee. It seems like so long ago, but he was on a 30-goal pace in that shortened season, right, when he got his big contract. So I still see him as a 30-plus goal scorer, but he's going to have to show it. Tippett was already trajecting that way at the end of last year, where Farabee was finally starting to catch up.
Yeah, I think he looked better. It's just you got to see more of the actual production.
How he looks at preseason will be a big thing with Farabee.
Definitely, yeah.
Speaking of which, he is next. Joel Farabee. Has he recovered? What's his projection? And his backups, what I have, we mentioned already, Cam Atkinson, Scott Lawton. Combination of those two guys. You look at that left side, I pointed out before. Maybe it won't be Atkinson that gets shifted to the left side, but I could definitely see Scott Lawton. For some reason, let's say Joel Farabee. I can even see it to start the year. I had, Lawton on the third line, but I could see Scott Lawton playing top line left wing with TK and Coots. Absolutely, I could see it. So those are the backups, and I think that's all right, actually. I think even if Farabee starts off on the third line, with Frost and Forrester, something that's actually a pretty dope line. If he starts off that way, I really like our depth at wing. I mean, we're short a left winger, but the fact we have so many right wingers, it's not too bad. I think he's going to do it, though. I expect a big season from Joel Farabee. I really love him. And I think we're down on him because of a down year, and that shit is super common, as we've seen.
Yeah, exactly right. I mean, it's what have you done for me lately, obviously, and that's what people remember what happened the most recently, right? So they remember the Farabee of last year, who didn't really have a great season, but obviously you got to factor in the whole disc replacement surgery, the fact he had no offseason to train. I think with a full offseason under his belt, he's going to look a lot more similarly to what we saw pre-injury, which was a guy that was trending towards being a 30-goal scorer. That was a two-way guy. He could play for you on the penalty kill, could play for you on the power play, could be an all situations type player. I think that's what Joel Farabee, eventually projects to be if he does reach, what the Flyers are expecting of him here. And I think he has a good shot to do it, just because if you look at last season, as the season progressed, I mean, he hit a really slow point and lull during the middle, but near the end of the season, he did look a lot quicker, a lot more engaged in board battles, was producing even more scoring-wise. So I think as the time elapsed, you saw him kind of gain some of that strength back and look more like his old self. And it was similar to Eichel, right? Like, who had the same surgery, where he came back, he didn't really look like himself for almost a year after the surgery, 6 months after the surgery, and then he finally kind of picked his game up. So I think it's going to be a similar type of thing with Farabee. If for some reason, he just looks like a shell of his former self still, and he hasn't been able to, get back to where he was, that's very unfortunate. And it just shows how, back injuries are no joke. Even at a young age, when you have all this new technology, like that can really affect somebody and how, they're going to go about their career after such a significant injury, right? So if that's the case, I mean, that's terrible news for him and the Flyers, obviously. But I do think you're right. Like Scott Laughton, I think, was even essentially almost a replacement for him this past season, right? Like Farabee got started in that first line role, didn't really go according to plan, as Tortorella realized that Farabee was not producing to that level. He kind of put Laughton in bigger ice time positions, playing on the top line, playing on the second line, things like that. So I think Laughton for sure would be a backup there, especially too with the power play time that he was getting last season as well.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. We'll note that Scott Laughton was pushed down the lineup at the end of the year, but that was really not because of his play. It was on purpose. And literally, Tortorella came out publicly. He's like, I'm pushing Scott Laughton down so I can play these young guys. It wasn't because Laughton was inadequate in the position he was. It was literally just forcing the young guys. And in fairness, they responded. The young guys did start playing a lot better. So I think we'll see a mix this year. Regardless, I think we're going to see a lot of line combinations of preseason, and then we'll see the lines changing as the season goes on. But I would not be shocked if the season starts with Scott Laughton on the top line left wing. All right, this is the last topic. We're moving off of a player. You mentioned it earlier, and this is, in my opinion, the biggest question mark. It's the power play. Will it progress? It was horrendous last year. It was awful the year before, awful the year before that. And there is more talent on this team. We talked about the offensive core. Yes, the back end lacks, but you do have enough forwards healthy right now on paper to create a somewhat respectable power play. Can we get in the 15 to 20 range where it's not a joke anymore?
It's not last 2 times in a row, right?
Yeah, exactly. So I'm looking for that from this team. I believe they absolutely can get to the 20 range, like that 20, 17, 19, 21 even. Like just that area, I think, is a respectable climb if they finish the year like that. And the biggest X factor, the backup there, is if the power play doesn't do well. My thought is this penalty kill is becoming very interesting. Yes, the defense lacks on it, but the forwards do not. I would actually say the Flyers' PK forwards are actually pretty damn good. So maybe where they lack, like they did this past year, offensively on the power play, maybe they can be one of the better shorthanded teams in the league again and try to make up for some of those lost goals on the PK. And I think that's maybe their saving grace in the special teams department, is that their penalty kill could actually be pretty good this year.
Yeah, I think the power play is a huge question. Obviously, the Flyers were last in the league back-to-back seasons. So if you look at it from that perspective, the only way to go is up, right? At least that's what you hope. So we'll see. Can they get to 15 to 20? I think it'll be hinging on, okay, will Couturier be healthy for the whole year? Yes. Then I think that gives them a better chance. Does Morgan Frost find his footing on the power play? If yes, and he produces on the power play like he has in the past, the AHL and junior levels, I think that definitely propels the Flyers up the rankings there. Can Owen Tippett, unleash his shot a little more on the power play and use his one-timer a bit more? If that's the case, I think too they'll be better, and Forster there too as well. I think can be a weapon for them on the power play. So I think all those factors, you got to consider them together there. And if it's a yes for all of them, I think they probably do end up being a lot better. If it's only about half of them end up, happening, maybe not last in the league, but you're like 20th, 25th, which would technically be an improvement. I mean, my thought is if Atkinson's healthy, Couturier is healthy, you don't have major injuries or anything like that to like a Tippett, Forster, Farabee, Frost, and they're all healthy for you. If they are last again or in the bottom 3 again, like Rocky Thompson, unfortunately has to be gone. It's just the nature of it, right? Because that's 2 seasons in a row where you have him And technically, you got guys back that should make your power play better, and your young guys should be improving, and your power play still is just trash.
It doesn't have
So,
to be at the
like,
bottom of the league.
yeah, there has to be some adjustments made there, and it's more of a coaching thing because I think talent-wise, I don't think it's bottom of the league if all those guys are back,
Right.
just based on their skill sets and things like that. The penalty kill is interesting. We kind of mentioned it last week. Like I think their forward core could be, really good. Obviously, you have Couturier, who's one of the best penalty kills in the league. Atkinson was one of the best penalty killers in the league, or as known to have been, throughout his career. And then you have Lawton and Konechny, who were like a really great duo last season and put up a lot of offense. So I think their penalty kill can be good. Obviously,
And
the
Noah
defense.
Cates.
Yeah, and Cates as well. I didn't even mention him, and he's kind of a defensive expert for them last season as a rookie. So there's only room to grow for him in his first year. Obviously, going into future seasons, I think the real X factor is the goaltending. I mean, you're only as your penalty killing, in my opinion, and this is always going to be my opinion. Your penalty killing is as good as your goaltender is. If your goaltender is not good on the penalty kill, your penalty killing is not going to be good. Doesn't matter who's in front of him. If you can't stop a puck on the penalty kill, you're gonna have a bad penalty kill. So Carter Hart was pretty good on the penalty kill last season. The Flyers penalty kill was a bit improved. It wasn't the greatest, but I believe it was around the 20 to 22 mark, something along those lines. So it was improved from last season. I think Hart, every season, other than the couple during the pandemic where he's been had really bad stats, has shown improvement typically. So I would expect Hart to continue to get better, and with that, the Flyers penalty kill only benefits, right? If he's on his game and he's playing how he can, we know how difficult he is to beat. So you add Couturier and Atkinson back to that penalty kill mix, and Hart's playing well. There's no reason why they can't be top 15 penalty kill in my mind. So
Yeah, I mean, and then you look at Walker and Risto and Stahl and York and Sanheim. These guys can all play the penalty kill. Sealer. So they have a lot of options on the penalty kill, and it's mostly a defensive role. It's not a lot of breakout passes, so you can keep it simple. You can block shots, play physical, and it's what a lot of these defensemen we have that do well. So it is actually somewhat in our strength. So potentially might have a decent penalty kill this year, and I think that's our saving grace to being ultra competitive. You can't have both your power play and your penalty kill be shit and get anywhere.
Well, we've said this before. Special teams in the NHL right now is so crucial. Yeah. If you have bad special teams, likely chances you're a bad team.
It's
right?
a defining factor. Yeah.
Yeah, those are the really big parts of the game. So even if just the penalty kill ends up being decent, like it's 15th ranked, and your power play is like 20th, like it's not really good or anything, but based off where the Flyers have been the past few seasons, that's a significant upgrade. So it could make them a lot better, right?
Yeah, and Bradshaw will be back, and look, it's going to be interesting for him. He's going to have a whole new D crew now, so
yeah, definitely
see where he ends up. But I think the Flyers are in okay shape for special teams. I don't want to see the power play operate, and I don't disagree with what you're saying about Rocky Thompson. You have to consider it. All right, that's the end of this episode. Vasili, you got anything else for our listeners?
Not too much, but we're going to keep going throughout the summer. So thanks for sticking with us and continuing to support. And as the season kind of nears back around, we're going to have, even more fun content on flyersnitty-gritty.com. So check it out, everybody.
Dude. Again, thank you everybody for listening. Please like, subscribe, give us a rating on iTunes and on Spotify. All humongous help. Check out our team store. Follow myself and Vasili on Twitter. I'm Y Wolok. Vasili is Flyer It Up. Also follow Jamie Baskow at Jamie Baskow. It's also Becca's birthday today, so happy birthday, Becca. If for any chance you're listening.
Happy birthday.
Yeah, she's awesome. She's part of our group. And again, we love you guys. Thank you so much for listening. And like Vasili said, we're going to be going up through summer, and you guys are motivating that, and the number increase, our views increase is motivating that. So you guys are the shit. Thank you all. Love you guys. And remember, always stay